Hi, everyone. My name is Judy Unger. I am a librarian here at Brookdale Community College, and I am the moderator for this wonderful event that we're going to be having right now. The title of this event has changed a little bit, so I'm going to give you the title and then we'll proceed. So the title is now called Stories Behind the American Dream. And today's presenters are Dr. Ashley Zampogna-Krug, who is a history professor at Brookdale Community College. And we also have two students, Bianca, Japitana, and Jesus, Calle. So with that being said, I'm going to do a little procedural thing right here. I am going to be reading our community agreement. And I'm going to read it really slowly so that everybody understands what we are about to embark upon today. We come together during Civility Week to enhance our understanding of and learn more about the meaning and importance of civility. We commit to honest, brave, respectful conversation where participants are encouraged to speak openly, listen actively, embrace curiosity, and gather wisdom. Together, we will strive to learn and grow, listen and understand, recognize that experiences are perceived, acknowledge where power and privilege exist, and provide space for all voices to share. That's our community agreement. That's what we are agreeing to do in this session. So with that being said, I am going to pass it on to Dr. Zampogna-Krug, who will begin our session today.
All right, good morning, everybody. It's so nice to see so many people here for this presentation. We're very excited to give this little presentation to you and share so many stories from the past and also the present. So to begin, this is one of my favorite quotes from an immigration historian named Oscar Handlin. He quite some time ago wrote what was a very famous book called The Uprooted. It was a history of American immigration. And in this quote from him, once I thought to write a history of immigrants in America, then I discovered that the immigrants were American history. I think that many of you will find that you do have connections and you can relate to some of these stories, whether it's through your ancestors or through yourself, because so much and almost all of American history is the stories of all the immigrants who have come here under so many different circumstances. So we want to begin today by emphasizing some key ideas and points. And we have three certain truths here. You're going to kind of see these in the stories that we highlight. Every immigrant story and experience is unique and adds richness to American society, history, and culture. Every immigrant endures challenges. So we'll see lots of those examples today as well, that this pursuit of the American dream is not an easy one. And number three, every immigrant is drawn to the United States or any other receiving country due to certain pull factors and leaves their home because of certain push factors. That's always a key ingredient in these stories. We're emphasizing the word every here to really help all of us to see each, it doesn't matter whether the immigrant came on a student visa or a work visa, or if their visa expired, or if they came without proper papers or false papers, or if they have, temporary protected status, or if they are a DACA recipient, like all of that. When we say every, we mean every, no matter what type of status or lack of status, these ideas and these truths apply, right? So in centering these immigrant stories in the American narrative, there are also a couple things that we want to draw your attention to. And again, these are what you're going to see as we share these stories in the past and present. So this is kind of like an interpretive framework that we're going to center our presentation around. The first is that while there are repeating patterns in immigrant histories and stories, we cannot equate a contemporary immigrant's experience with those of the past, but we can use the stories of the past to create a framework for understanding and listening, right? Context is always different. Immigration policy changes over time. The laws change, the enforcement procedures change. There's always differences that make every single experience unique. And yet, as I said at the beginning, we will see themes that pop out in the past and in the present. The second here that we're also going to notice, and is another a way that we're conveying these stories, is through the idea that the policies created by government institutions have often been more concerned with regulating who is in and who is out, and are therefore often incompatible with the international occurrences creating the push and pull factors that lead to immigrant waves. We can see this too in the immigrants' stories. So our first set of stories that we're going to highlight, we're going to go back to the 1850s and 1860s and begin with some stories of Chinese laborers and immigrants. So Chinese laborers started coming, they were lured by the gold rush. They were lured by Western expansion, right? There were many opportunities in the West, in the United States at the time, and lured by labor opportunities. The one that you see here, building the Central Pacific Railroad, which was the Western extension of the Trans-Pacific, or the Transcontinental, Railroad that connected the eastern part of the country to the western part of the country. So this was like a monumental, massive piece of infrastructure for the United States at the time. Chinese laborers ended up making up about 90% of the labor force of the Central Pacific Railroad. And you can see in these images, even though they're old and grainy, right? The one on the left showing the Chinese laborers using carts to fill a ravine while building that railroad, and the one on the right showing them excavating a portion in the Sierras. So they were working in very difficult climates and terrains. It was really dangerous work, but really important work. Their work went largely unnoticed until 2014. In 2014, the National Park Service finally recognized and gave honor to the work of Chinese laborers and created a Hall of Honor for them. So during this wave in the 1850s, 1860s, immigration was pretty open. There was, it was not a very complex system. Chinese laborers would have been able to enter fairly easily, and also would have been able to go back to China fairly easily. So a lot of these laborers were men who went back and forth. Things then changed pretty dramatically as we move a little bit later into the later 1800s, specifically 1882, when the United States passed the Chinese Exclusion Act. And this was motivated by increasingly prevalent anti-Asian sentiment on the West Coast in response to the increasing numbers of Chinese immigrants arriving. In 1882, this Chinese Exclusion Act barred Chinese laborers from entering the country and prohibited Chinese immigrants from becoming naturalized citizens. It was not repealed until 1943. So as you can imagine, this it causes some issues and some ripples, and we can see this also in the stories. So many of the stories that we're going to show are stories that are collected through the Angel Island immigration station. So the majority of Chinese immigrants in the 1800s entered through the West Coast, right? So we're all on the East Coast. We're familiar with Ellis Island, but the West Coast immigration station was Angel Island. Between 1910 and 1940, in total, there were about 1 million immigrants processed in and out. But in terms of Chinese immigrants, that number was 178,000 that were admitted. And notice this is between 1910 and 1940. This is after the passage of the 1882 Exclusion Act, which barred those Chinese laborers. About 100,000 were detained in this immigration station. They were put through medical screening. They were heavily interrogated. And it was a very embarrassing and humiliating process for many of these immigrants. Chinese immigrants, there were many other groups that also went through this immigration station. They made up about 70% of the entire detainee population at this immigration station. And their average stay was 2 to 3 weeks. So they had some time in this station, and they left snippets and records of their experience and their stories while held here. So all on the walls at the Angel Island Immigration Station, which you can visit today, there are poems written on the walls. They're actually carved. I'll show you on the next slide an image of a poem carved into the wall. And here are 2 different poems, one that is anonymous. So some of these were not signed by the individual who wrote it. I clasped my hands in parting with my brothers and classmates. Because of the mouth, which is right, because of the need to feed oneself and make a living, I hastened to cross the American Ocean. How was I to know that the Western barbarians had lost their hearts and reason? With 100 kinds of oppressive laws, they mistreat us Chinese. And then the other one, as you can see, crossing the faraway ocean to arrive in America, leaving behind my hometown, family, and friends. Who would have expected to be stranded in a wooden building, not knowing when I can hold my head up with pride? And we have the author of that poem, 2 examples of many others that are on the walls of this immigration station. So there's an example of one of the poems inscribed. So when we said at the beginning that, the immigration policies in place didn't coincide with the push and pull factors, this is a great example of that. So there was still pull factors drawing Chinese immigrants and many others too, but focusing on this particular example, drawing them to the United States. There were still labor demands, despite the fact that there was this massive restriction policy in place. So what ended up happening, as happens in numerous other waves in US history, is immigrants found ways to continue to move and to continue to strive and meet their needs. You have a quote here from Mr. Chan, who was one of these Angel Island detainees, who wrote, "We didn't want to come in illegally, but we were forced to because of the immigration laws. They particularly picked on the Chinese. If we told the truth, it didn't work. So we had to take the crooked path." So there were numerous efforts to try to use political and economic means to remove this restriction policy, and it did not succeed. And so there were other paths taken. Some individuals were able to come as being tied to some of the exempt categories, which would be merchants, as an example, religious leaders. And they could have a connection with one of those categories and be able to find a way in. But there were many false papers created, many families in the United States who claimed to have children in China and brought them over. There are numerous stories of the descendants of some of these immigrants who only find out later that the last name that they thought was their family last name was not their family last name. And it was a made up paper and a way to bring them over to the United States. So here's also a good example that also shows that in addition to the continued pull factors, there were still push factors. So, China's history, particularly between 1850 and 1950, is pretty tumultuous. There's a lot of internal and external stuff going on, right? The Taiping Rebellion, the Opium Wars, moving into the 1900s, you've got Japanese invasion of China and imperialism. So it's a really unstable time in China's history, really creating those push factors, making it urgent for people to leave because their needs are not being met. They're either not safe or they don't have the resources that they need, basic resources like food. So here's a story of La Shilo, who shared her story of what happened, how the changes started to take place when she was 12 years old, how their farmland was destroyed and their property, how they did not have food, adequate food to eat. Some of our neighbors even had to go begging or sell their daughters. It was that bad. Her parents decided to marry her off at the age of 18 to a 34-year-old who had already traveled to the United States, to California. They referred to the United States as the Gold Mountain because of the gold rush that first drew in so many waves of these immigrants. So it shows on the other side, that push factor that coincides with the pull factor and creates challenges, but also at the same time shows this amazing resilience and ingenuity and perseverance despite those challenges. So moving forward through time, I'm going to share part of a personal narrative as well, because we are sharing some personal stories here today. And this is a photograph of my paternal great-grandparents. This is Michael and Virginia Lorenzoni. They came from the province of Lucca in Tuscany, from Italy. They actually had their first two children in Italy, and my great-grandmother was pregnant with the third when they took the boat over and came to New York City. So she reported being very sick, which I can imagine that would be horrible, and first settled in New York City. And then they heard word that there was a lumber industry, and they were recruiting laborers. And so they eventually moved from New York City to Cain, Pennsylvania. Cain, Pennsylvania is the most rural place that you could ever imagine. It would be the polar opposite of New York City in every way, shape, or form. But once they moved to Cain, that is where they decided to stay. And my great-grandfather worked in the lumber industry for some time, and then he eventually opened up his own auto garage, and the family lived in the room on top of the garage. But, when I was talking to my father about them, he, had commented and remembers that, for much of their life, they were very poor. They were farmers, and that land is still held by my family. So my father, we have a cabin now on that property that was first owned by my great-grandparents. And so there are so many photos showing the generations that have come since then. This photo is about 1910. And so also to illustrate at this point, they probably arrived in 1901, 1902 was probably their date of arrival or year of arrival. And they wouldn't have had, there were very few restrictions in place for them, for immigrants coming from Italy. So the hoops that they would have had to jump through would not have been nearly the kind of hoops that immigrants have to jump through today. But it's also, kind of curious to think if they would have come a couple decades later, their story could have ended up being very different. There are many different, I'm highlighting 1924 here. There are so many different immigration acts passed from 1882 to 1903, 1917, 1921. In 1924, this is another the Johnson-Reed Act, another restriction policy put in place that established additional quotas based on national origin. And the quota for Italians was dropped really dramatically. Their quota was 3,845 permitted per year, and based on a number of laborers. And during 1929, again, just to show the difference, 19,083 Italians gained entrance, even though the quota was at that 3,845. So they're gaining entrance as being part of those exempt quotas, like being merchants, being religious officials, and also through family reunification as well. But it shows, again, another example, even though also very different from what happened with the Chinese, because they were still able to become naturalized. That's one of the biggest differences. So they were undesirable, but not totally blocked, and also seen as white. So they had that to their advantage. But there continued to be a discrepancy between the policy in place and the push and pull factors. So these are letters that I had found at the Immigration History Research Center at the University of Minnesota. These were letters, and these are just little snippets written to the Italian Exile League, which was an organization that tried to offer legal help and assistance to Italians arriving at the time. And you have some quotes here. I've been in this country for many months. I landed illegally because I escaped from Italy as persecutions continued. So remember, this is, in the 1920s, Mussolini was in power in Italy. He was a fascist dictator, and Italy was going through some difficult, tumultuous, moments in its history. And you've got another quote down here from another writer to the Italian Exile League. In this, public speeches made by those governing in the name of democracy bring about laws against foreigners, and most against those who, forced by the most terrible actions, were compelled to take refuge in this country, leaving their dear ones in their native land and carrying the weight of a bitter life of exile. We wish that all the workers, all the unions, and all the workers' organizations protect the Italian Exile League. There are also newspaper accounts of Italians fleeing to France at this time. So they're trying to go to other countries, because if they could not get into the United States, or maybe they had family in those countries, so that can also be a pull factor, having a connection. The story of Amedea Palati and her son Bruno highlights the difficulties and the violence that some of these individuals faced in Italy. Amedea's husband was murdered by fascist police. And after his murder, and after the trial in which she identified the fascists who murdered her husband, all of them were found not guilty. Once that trial was over and her husband's death was not, she did not get any justice in her husband's death, she decided with her son Bruno that they had to leave. And she talks about the difficulties of obtaining a passport in Italy, and how the Italian government kind of played around with them and issued passports and then took them away. And she was receiving threats. And finally, they are able to secure their passports. And you can see her quote here about leaving this country, about leaving Italy at the time. "Nothing can keep me in this country any longer, neither the grave of my husband, to which it is forbidden me to bring flowers, nor my relatives, nor my business. Before I leave, I will tell the world how things are going along in Italy, how cruel the Italian regime actually is, and how great are the sufferings and the despair." So she was pretty amazing, because she was able to publish her story in New Masses, and then she also published it in a French newspaper as well, and it got some attention. But again, it's highlighting the push factors in Italy at the time, and highlighting that. And my last story, before I turn this over to the real stars of the show, and I want to keep my eye on the time here, and we're not going to tell my husband that I have a photograph of him in my presentation. So this is a secret for all of you, and will be published in the recording. But this is a photograph of my husband with his grandmother. So this is Irma. Irma Krug, who was an immigrant from Germany. And I had the privilege and I was fortunate to interview her. So I encourage all of you out there in the audience, talking to your family, learning your story and where your family came from is really important. So when I was a graduate student, I sat down with her with a recorder and I said, Irma, I'm going to interview you. You need to share your story. And she came from Germany in 1937. So, right, Germany is going through some stuff in 1937. So it's right, not long before World War II starts. And she was 11 years old, and she was the only person in her family that ever came to the United States. She walked around her house saying, I want to go to the United States. I want to go to America. And she confesses later that she had no idea what America was like. She had no idea what to expect, but she wanted to go. So at the age of 11, she left. She had to travel with one of the daughters of a neighbor of the family who was 21 because she could not travel as an unaccompanied minor at the time. So the 11-year-old Irma traveled with a 21-year-old girl on the ship Europa for 6 days and landed in New York City. She took a train from New York City to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where she met up with her aunt. They cut her braids immediately. So she recalls that vividly, and she still has her braids, and it was like an immediate Americanization. They wanted her to have a haircut that blended her in with American society. Then they traveled to St. Mary's, Pennsylvania, which is another very rural, small town where I grew up in Western Pennsylvania. And she talks about the difficulties of school. She was intellectually at about a first grade level because she was not really educated in Germany. And they put her in the 6th grade. And she talked about how difficult that was. She talked about the difficulty of learning English and how challenging that was. And what's really remarkable is that she refers to her, what she called as her mother and father were actually her aunt and uncle. Who she referred to as her brothers were actually her cousins. So from the age of 11, she did travel back to Germany maybe 5 times, but it was kind of she left and never went back. And if you didn't know her story, you would think that her aunt and uncle were really her mother and father because that's what she referred to them as. And you would think that her cousins were really her brothers. So it's to highlight, again, just another, she's a remarkable woman, and speaking to her and learning from her has been a really wonderful privilege in my life. And I'm glad that I talked to her and had the interview before she passed away because she's not with us anymore. So now we're going to shift from these historical stories to contemporary stories. And we've got the stories of Bianca and Jesus to share with you today. And before they go, I just want to add one quick note. This is I'm so happy to highlight these stories and that the audience is able to listen to these, because this is the highlight of the kind of job, the career that I have, and other coworkers I have who work at Brookdale know this. We are very lucky to be able to learn from students all the time. So the students on this call, students are teachers, and we're going to have the amazing joy of experiencing that today by listening to Bianca and Jesus. Go ahead, Bianca.
Sorry. I'm Bianca Japitana. I moved to the United States in 2019. I'm from South Africa, and I attend Brookdale, and I'm in a nursing major.
Wonderful, Bianca. Okay, Jesus. Wait.
Jesus, can you unmute yourself?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Hi, everyone. Well, December 16 of 2017, I came to the United States with my heart full of hope and my mind full of dreams, desires, goals, and of course, couldn't miss my suitcase full of many belongings. Of course, I brought a lot of clothes because I say I don't want to buy clothes in the United States. So I need to save money. So I bought all my clothes. So why did I do that? I was leaving my country. No, I was looking for a new horizon. I was looking for a new family, a new life. I brought with me a lot of expectation. I wanted to build a different life and pursue new goals. But one of my biggest goals was to learn English, to start a new career here. And I was hoping to find my soulmate in this new totally and strange world for me. Silly for me, no? Looking for something here. I'm still looking for my soulmate. I haven't found it yet. After getting on that plane, it was when I realized that my life, it was about to be rebooted from having everything to nothing. Now, I have heard so many people to speak about their experiences in the United States, what they had most to live, what they had to do to survive, about how many times they cried. And of course, the biggest challenge, how hard was the language for them? I was so scared. I won't lie about it. I was not sure if I was gonna do it. But as always, I did not let this feeling stop me from what I had decided already. So I said to myself, you can do it. And I didn't change my mind. A new beginning, it was 5 hours away, because this is what the flight takes to come to my country to here. I was leaving behind my job. I was leaving behind my friends. I was leaving behind my family. But mainly, I was leaving the country that saw me grow. I was 100% aware of this, that wasn't gonna be easy for me. Living in a new country, different people. I heard a lot of things about the gringos. No offense, that's how we call in Latin America and Central America to you people, because we don't know how to say to that. You know, in Colombia, we say Colombian. In Ecuador, we say Ecuadorian. But how we can call people from the United States? So that's what we say, gringos. Don't take it wrong. But most challenging and difficult for me was the language. I was thinking about it. It was literally a new sunrise for me. Well, it was. My flight was before midnight from my country on the 16th, and I arrived to the United States at dawn on the 17th. So it was a new beginning for me. Most of the people that know me think that just because I'm living in the United States made me automatically be rich. No, that I have a wonderful life here, that I have a great work, a job. They also think that I'm all the time in New York at the Big Apple shopping at the big store. And you know what? I haven't bought anything yet. I haven't been in those stores yet. I don't even know them yet. So I tell them, no, just because this is the United States doesn't mean that the money comes from the sky or the money grows on trees. We must work. We have to go out there and have work to get that money. And I tell them, I don't even have a job. Why? They don't even know that I'm international student in the United States and I'm not allowed to work. So they don't even think, how am I dealing with these situations in the United States? So I tell everyone who asks me, from my country and from here, living in the United States is even harder than living in Colombia, where I am from. Living here is synonymous of hard work, loneliness, courage, survival, sacrifices, and many times being humiliated and despised. Also, it is synonymous with quitting things that we love and sacrificing others in order to have a better life. People who have left the country or don't even have tried to learn another language are the first to judge, criticize, and throw the first rock with hurtful comments. They don't even know what this experience is like. And it's not only our own people, it is also from people from here, sadly, but true. Can anyone here imagine how it feels to be banned to speak just because we can't speak a language? Think about it. I've been there. It was my first time giving in the United States, and I was taught you cannot speak in Spanish because we don't know what you're saying. And you could say something about us and we don't know if it's true or not. So what I had to do, shut my mouth. And I said to myself, this is not gonna happen anymore. I'm not coming to this house anymore. And that's what I did. But that didn't stop me, no? And emigrating to another country is not easy. Never is. The word itself means a way to improve life, pursue dreams and diversify, and therefore strengthen communities around the world. The sacrifice the many like me made to build a new life is what counts when we are talking about immigration. The reason that moved us, the stories behind each one of us, the reality that we must live when we emigrate. Everyone outside the United States always talk about the American dream, that American dream, the long and awaited American dream. But there is a question. Is it really a dream? How many could say so? I would say it is more like a nightmare for me. It was, and still. Not because just the country, it's because you have to quit so many things. I quit to my family. I quit to my friends. I quit to my country. Even though I have them in my heart, I'm alone in this country. I have nobody here. So when we talk about immigration, this is not just something that is happening now. This has been seen since the existence of the humanity. It is a natural state of man to immigrate, to change, always seeking better life and places. But United States, this is supposed to be a country of freedom. For example, the Statue of Liberty itself is a monument to freedom, an icon of democracy, as well as a monument of welcome and beacon of hope for immigrants arriving in New York. When we are in our country, my case in Colombia, we see United States in the newspaper, on the TV and internet, and we think, oh my God, United States. That's the big thing, the Big Apple. And we never see our opportunity to do that to move to reach that dream that we most of that has. The United States became known as a safe haven for those seeking shelter from dangerous conditions abroad. And so it was for me. There are so many stories behind each one of us. Some of them are really sad, others horrible. And I know so many people who have to leave the country just because they were being persecuted to be killed, or by the same social violence, discrimination, many reasons. But before judging them, please listen to our stories, to their stories. But I am not here just to speak about how I was treated or not in the United States. I'm here to speak about being in the United States and being successful, triumphant, to never give up, not letting anything to take you down. I would say from all my experiences that I have lived, that this has been the most meaningful and enriching that I have lived so far. People always also tell me, all that you have lived makes you stronger. And I always respond, who said that I want to be stronger? I'm not strong enough. Sometimes I want to feel weak and just quit and give up. I'm not strong. I am in the United States. I'm pursuing my goals to be a nurse. And I will graduate and help as many as I can to pursue the dreams as I'm doing it until today. Thank you.
Jesus, thank you for that story. Bianca, can you speak to the audience about also why you came, what brought you to Brookdale and to New Jersey, and also some of the challenges that you've encountered along the way?
So I grew up in South Africa, a very racial country, which makes it hard for everyone to, have fair education. For example, like some schools are for free, some schools you have to go and you have to pay for. I mean, not a problem. But so I grew up in South Africa, and I left the country when I was 19 because I had no job. I graduated high school in 2018 with no, like my parents didn't have the money to send me to school. It was hard, like money was tight. You had to make sure, you spend wisely. And we were 4 kids. So, that makes it even harder. But so I didn't have a job. And I knew someone and I worked for this lady. She was in the United States, actually. Her husband was back home and she asked me to take care of her husband. So, like for 3 months, that was my job. That was my income. I wasn't happy. I was accepted for interior architecture and I was like, wow, this is what I'm going to do. And never would I wouldn't imagine, coming to the United States because how am I going to do it? Who's going to pay for my ticket? Like how am I going to survive? So in March 2019, she reached out to me and she's like, my son just had a kid, like no one can take care of her. Would you be interested coming to the United States? So at first I was like, no, like I have everything here. I know what I want to do. Knowing deep inside of me, like I don't know how I'm gonna do it. So I took the opportunity. I went through a program who helped me get my visa. And April 2019, I arrived in Manhattan. It was great, it wasn't that hard to get here, but I would say some challenges that I have encountered was definitely how can I say it? Like, I grew up on a farm, very close to the beach, and it was a very tight-knit community. Everyone knew each other. if you went to school, you know, like you are most probably family with that person's family along the line. Like you most probably have a history with their family. So it was hard because in Manhattan, you know, you walk in the streets, and I wouldn't say there's one day that I walked the street and I recognized somebody's face. So I eventually met my husband, who back at the time was my boyfriend, and we were looking for colleges, you know, because I had to study, I had to do something. And we came across a bunch, you know, phone call to phone call, trying to, you know, find the college for me. And I would say I ended up at Brookdale because people are warm. People made me feel welcome. I was busy doing my application, and the one day I was working out, and someone from Brookdale called me, you know, months after I did my application, after I was accepted, asking me, do you need help with something else? And that's the only college that, you know, made it feel like a personal connection, like actually caring about me, you know, getting what I need and having everything. So yeah, that's how I ended up in Brookdale. I'm doing nursing. I moved to New Jersey after my program ended in when was it, April 2021. So that's how I ended up in New Jersey. But yeah, so my family is also built on immigrants, you know, immigration. My great great grandmother and my great grandmother immigrated from Holland to South Africa. And South Africa is basically, you know, found by Dutch people. So I would say, you know, I'm just following, you know, family tradition. And I felt stuck because people, they live in a box there. So, you know, with not having the opportunity to go to school, not going, you know, not having a job because you have no experience, but people won't hire you because you don't have any experience. I was sad, you know, I felt very depressed. I was like, you know, what am I gonna do? And I knew I wanted more, and I knew I can do more. And that's why, you know, I'm very grateful for this opportunity that I received. It really changed my life. And, you know, like, it wasn't that hard for me to get into the country, but, you know, internally there was a lot of stuff, you know, not having your family. Like, I mean, I was 19 years old when I packed my bags, you know, said bye to my family, and I haven't been home since 2019, you know, so that's hard.
Thank you, Bianca. Both of you have such amazing stories. I know the audience can see what I mean when I say this is how we learn from our students, and this is how we learn from each other, by listening to each other's listening to our stories. We just have, I'm gonna present some opportunities where the audience can also share stories, and that's how we'll close out for today. But before we do, to Jesus or Bianca, is there anything else you want the audience to know about you or your story that we have not covered?
I wouldn't say, you know, something about me, but I do think that it's important to know that, you know, I think people should keep an open mind about immigrants, because like Jesus said, like, people leave for a reason. And, you know, like we said in our meeting when we made for the preparation of this, everyone who comes to this country brings something with them, you know. Like a silly example, I did the essay the other day, and you know, Chipotle is an American. It's something that people brought into the country. It's something that immigrants brought into the country. And I think it's important to keep an open mind about that. You know, everyone who comes in, they bring talent. They, you know, they start something new. And I think that's important to remember.
Yeah, as Bianca says, I would like to add that behind our reasons, there is always a reality. Most of us come to United States push for something, no, force for something that we didn't have in our country. We don't want to have a harder life in another country, trying to have a harder life. No, for example, I didn't ask to sleep in my car for 1 week, driving around of my town, thinking what I'm gonna do tonight, and thinking I'm gonna get called for somebody, or thinking when I'm gonna be tomorrow. Nobody asked for that. Nobody wants that in their life. So just when we are in that situation is when what we realize that what we have in our motherland and what we don't have in here. It's really hard. You know, many times I cried. Many times I decided to get back to Colombia. Many times I wish being with my mom and my family. And many times I bought a ticket to get back to Colombia. But I always said, no, nothing is gonna stop me. Even though all those situations that I was going through. But what I ask to you guys is that before you judge us, think about our life, what we had to deal with, what we had to live. If we have somebody in home thinking about us or we not. Like me, for example, I'm alone in this country. I come home and I have nobody home waiting for me. Or say to me, how was your day? What did you do? How was classes? I got nothing. You got everything. Just think about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much to both of you and your amazing stories, and really to hit home the point that we wanted to portray in this presentation, and we hope we did, to know that behind every single person, and you know, for the point of this presentation, behind every single immigrant, there is a story to humanize immigration in some way, and to look beyond so many of the stereotypes that are out there and what you might see circling, that it is a person. Anytime you see the numbers, 100,000 coming over, whatever, like those are 100,000 people with stories and reasons why, and to not judge and to just listen. So I want to share, before we close to the questions, for the audience, right? And ways that if you want to immerse yourself in more stories, if you want to find ways to share your story, there are so many amazing organizations and websites and opportunities out there. I have just a few listed here, and not necessarily the email addresses, but if you search these, like if you type in Tenement Museum, your story, our story, you will find it. The Tenement Museum has a virtual exhibit where people from all over the country share artifacts that highlight some part of their immigration story. And they might be the first generation to be here, like Jesus and Bianca, or they might be the third generation or fourth generation to be here, like myself and perhaps like some of you. But it's a way of weaving all of these stories together. There's also the Angel Island Immigration Station project. They have immigrant voices. You can read and listen to stories of the past and the present. You can add stories. There is I Stand with Immigrants, IamAnImmigrant.com. You can get connected to events that they hold, which are to draw attention to immigration in a positive way and to highlight the importance of immigrants in our societies. They also have a part on their website where you can read and share stories. And June is the month in which they celebrate immigrants. So that's when they'll have a lot of events going on to highlight that. The University of Minnesota, the Immigration History Research Center there, they also have a platform called Immigrant Stories, and they actually provide like a step-by-step guide. If you're not sure how to share your story, they walk you through it. And what's also amazing then is they archive those stories in their Immigration History Research Center. So they're collected and preserved and shared with others. For community members here, there are so many local immigrant organizations. I'm only highlighting a few: Casa Freehold, the Brazilian Help Center in Long Branch, the American Friends Service Committee in Red Bank. There are ways that you can get involved. There are ways that you can support immigrants in the community. For Brookdale students, we have clubs at the college that also can give you that kind of community engagement. Dreamers Plus, the International Students Association, ISA, which Jesus is a member of, Black Student Union, Asia Society, TIN, the Innovation Network, so many opportunities there. And then lastly, so that we can get to some questions from the audience, on March 31st, Brookdale will be hosting the Human Library, and we're proud to say we're the first community college in New Jersey to offer this. And this is not just to share immigrant stories. This is to share any story. The whole point of the Human Library is to highlight diversity across the board. But just to put it on your radar for Brookdale employees and students, we are recruiting and looking for individuals who want to volunteer to be books. And we will put the link into the chat where you can go to Brookdale's webpage, where we have more information, where you can fill out the form if you're interested in volunteering to be a book, and to engage in a dialogue with others and help to do what we hopefully tried to do today in relation to immigration, and just, you know, defy those stereotypes and offer valuable learning experiences. And so we thank you all for attending. And I know Judy is going to walk us through a reflection session at the end here. And so I'll stop my share.
Okay, before I do that, Raj, did you have a question? You had your hand raised.
Yeah, I just had a quick comment for that was fantastic. Ashley, I don't know how to say your name. Uses, is that how you say it?
Jesus.
You really, both of you, Bianca, and you really touched the core, I think, of everyone who was listening. I came from India in '94, and I just want to tell you both, hang in there. You will be so proud of yourselves. Even though we have some bad or negative experiences, as you call it, there are a lot of nice people in the US. It's just a wonderful place to be. And some of these things will seem not a big deal after some years. You're young, so you can, I feel, everything you said resonated with me: home, family, friends. It breaks your whole soul and being. But the very fact that you took that leap, that courage to come, like I did many years ago, like many on this call probably, also tells us that this is a great land. Look for the good things. Don't let those little things bum you down. I just wanted to say that very quickly because it is 11 o'clock and awesome. Something is wrong with my chat. I wasn't able to type in, so I just wanted to say that. Thank you so much.
Raj.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Raj. That's
Thank
so
you.
encouraging. Okay, so to close this event out, if you can hang on for a couple minutes, I'm going to pose 3 reflection questions about the presentation. I'd love to hear from at least 3 people per question. We'll make this as quick as possible. Please feel free to raise your hand or write in the chat when you are sharing your answers, okay? So the first question I have for you guys is, what did you learn from this session that challenged what you thought you knew? So you can either raise your hand. I know Sarah Burrell is on this call. People can help me. If you want to raise your hand or put it in the chat, what is something that you learned from today that challenged what you thought you knew about this topic? I'll give you a couple minutes to reflect on that. We're all deeply thinking. Great, Leo. Stories are more significant than statistics. I got to write that down. Leo, I'm quoting it. Stories are more significant than statistics. Okay, perfect. Anybody else have a reflection that they would like to share? Okay, let me go on to the second question. Oh, wait, somebody else said something. How very difficult it is to leave family, friends, and home, the land itself. That is so true, Suzanne. And I think that really hit home to me, and what made it so emotional for me to listen to those stories. I can't even imagine it. So anyway, anybody else?
I know I
yes.
spoke, but
Go ahead. You can speak more than once.
I saw this quote from President George Bush, which says, "It says something about our country that people around the world are willing to leave their homes and leave their families and risk everything to come to America. Their talent and hard work and love of freedom have helped make America the leader of the world. And our generations will ensure that America remains a beacon of liberty and the most hopeful society this world has ever known," which that just really stood out.
Can you do me a favor, Bianca? Could you share that quote where you got that website or whatever? I think
Yeah,
that's
of course.
really a good thing to say. Let's see what else somebody else has to say. Jennifer says that everyone has a story, and when you learn who someone is, the stereotypes and assumptions are squashed immediately, and you find yourself standing in front of someone that you instantly love. We are all humans and all hurt. No one is immune. Beautifully said, Jennifer, beautifully said. Okay, question number 2. Where do you see yourself in the stories shared during this session? And Raj and a couple other people in the chat have already communicated where they saw themselves. But does anybody else want to share about how you saw yourself in the story? Everywhere. Yeah, it's all.
While everybody is thinking on this question, there was one quick anecdote I wanted to add, and it kind of relates to this question, but I want to throw it in there while it's in my head, and just emphasizing the importance for all of us to listen and share and ask. A few years ago, I was teaching my immigration class, and students have to conduct an interview in that class. And I had 2 sisters in that class that year, and they were going to interview their mother. And they conducted this interview. They said like they never had deep conversations with their mom about how she came here and why she came, which kind of blew my mind. They said they had to meet her in the kitchen because the kitchen is where she would be willing to talk and listen. And they were preparing a meal and talking to their mom. And it was through that interview that they had to do in my class that they found out that their mom came through a coyote, through a smuggler, and was brought into the country. And they had no idea that that was her backstory. She never wanted to tell them, didn't, and that's the same with the example of Chinese immigrants. So much like shame and embarrassment because of what sometimes people do. And it's really bravery and resilience, but then they feel shame. But when they reported that in their interview, I had goosebumps. I was like, man, like that was like way more than they bargained for in a History 235 to realize this backstory behind their mom's journey. And so just, I regret, my grandparents are gone now. There's so many questions I would love to ask them. So it's like talk. For those of you here, like talk, interview, ask the questions. It's a treasure. When they're gone, and then you don't have it. So.
Yes, that's a great point, Ashley. All right, the last question I have is, what are you still curious about? after this session, what do you want to know more about as a result of this session? Anybody want to share? You're still reflecting.
Stephen has his hand up, Judy.
Oh, I'm sorry, Stephen. Go ahead.
So similar to what you just mentioned about your grandparents, I only have one grandparent left, and we recently just set up ancestry.com, and I'm learning things about my ancestors that I wish I knew when I had both of my grandparents still alive. It's amazing. I've gone back as far as 1800s.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, that ancestry.com really, you know, you find out all different kinds of things about your family background that you never knew, you know, Stephen, that's
Not only
really
that,
good.
but you see photographs that like from cousins and that you've never talked to before, and you get reconnected with other sides of the family.
That's great. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that. Really appreciate it.
No problem.
Deneen asks, what can we do better at Brookdale to support you in your journey? So I'll open that up to anyone who was in this similar situation, Bianca, Jesus, anyone. What can we do at Brookdale? And we do a lot of fantastic things at Brookdale, our International Center, the Dreamers Plus Club, you know, all of that. But Deneen's asking what, I'm sure that there are other things that we can do to be supportive here. And if you don't want to say right now, you know, you can always email Dr. Zampogna-Krug or myself or any, you know, your faculty that you know, take classes with, anybody that we can offer you support. Does anybody want to talk about that?
I don't have like a specific event, but you know, this is my first time attending this type of event, and I think it's, you know, I think it's a great opportunity to get the stories out there in order for people to understand, you know, just to have a better understanding of what people go through. Not necessarily to feel bad for them, but to understand, you know, because I think it's very easy for people to form an opinion. You know, it's very easy for people to judge, you know.
Yes.
They don't understand what you have to go through in order to get here. You know, just putting the stories out there.
Mm-hmm. I have an idea for something to do, but I don't want to share it right now, but it's just ruminating in my head. Luis asked, what is difficult to continue living in the US even when you remembered everything you sacrificed? I think he's curious about that. You know, maybe there's the day-to-day kind of irritations that you face. I don't know what you guys want to say about that. I think that's what he means.
For me,
Anyone.
Like for me being here, sorry, can you guys hear me? I don't know if my AirPods are dead.
Yeah, we can hear you.
You know, like being here, like it's hard. Like it's hard. COVID makes it hard. You can't go home. FaceTime is there, but FaceTime isn't always good enough, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think remembering what you came for and what you came from. I think that's remembering where you came from. I think that drives me personally most, you know, why you left, where you came from, and what you have achieved.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's true. And always thinking that even though any situation that you are going through, you must do everything right. No, don't take the easy path to get faster to your goals. No, and I keep myself busy, crazy busy, doing many things, and with my studies and work and all that thing that I have to do, to don't think a lot about my country and my family, and doing exercise, working out, and any other activity that I can do to keep my mind busy, to at least for a moment, not think as much as I want about my family, But even though that, for example, thank God for FaceTime.
Yes.
I FaceTime to my mom every single day. I call to my grandma every single day. And I talk to my brother and my sister and everyone back home in Colombia, at least to keep motivating myself, just by listening to them.
That's great, Jesus. Thank you. Yeah, FaceTime is good. We've ran a little bit over time here, but I think all of these conversations were so important. Let's keep this conversation going. You know, if I see you on campus, you and Bianca and everyone, and I'm in the library in room 141, so you can come in for a hug. I'm always happy to give that. And I'm sure everyone else here has really appreciated and valued what you said. You've been wonderful presenters, and Ashley, Dr. Zampogna-Krug, thank you for your presentation as well. I'm going to put into the chat a survey, if you would be so kind as to fill that out. You can comment about today's session. You can comment about the Civility Week overall, if you want to do that. This is very important information for us. Says the form is closed. Let me go back and find a new link real quick. Ashley, can you talk for about 2 seconds while I find the right link?
I think I have the correct link right here, Judy.
Okay, can you put the right one in? I'll
Yeah.
keep talking.
You can keep
Okay, so
talking.
that's easy for me to do, if anybody knows me. So I really appreciate you guys being here. That's the right one. I appreciate you guys being here and really supporting and really listening, which was part of our community agreement today. I'm just so happy about that. And please keep attending more Civility Week events. We have some other things coming up tonight, this afternoon, tomorrow, I think. So please support the students, faculty, and staff and the guest speakers that we have for our Civility Week. It's been going really great so far. So keep coming back. Okay. Thank you so much. Does anybody want to, has everybody